Ethan, it's great to connect today. I know we met several years ago at a conference. It's been a while since we've been in touch, but it's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me, Nick.
So, as you think back on your research and your productive career, what lesson have you learned that you would most want to pass on to others?
I guess I'll start with a couple of different things. The first, I study a concept I call employee voice. So what leads employees to speak up in organizations, to have honest and candid conversations with your boss about things that work and things that don't. How those conversations go, which honestly they range from really smooth to a complete hot mess. And then what organizations and leaders can do to better manage some of those conversations. And I'll kind of start with the premise, and really two of them, that first, being a little bit more honest with each other produces beneficial outcomes. And the reason why I say that is, kind of the irony of where a lot of this research on voice starts is with this notion that in order to make the best decisions, leaders at the top need access to the most relevant and accurate information. So you can't effectively lead an organization without having access to things like what are customer trends, or what are operational hurdles, or what's the state of, the economic environment that's going to lead to a strategy for the organization. The issue and the irony is the higher up you go in organizations, the less well connected you are to like all this, all the actual things that are going on to make those decisions effectively. And so you need people below you, those that are on the front lines and interfacing with customers, and those that are on the front lines encountering all those problems, to tell you the truth about what's working and what's not. And then you can make decisions. But the higher up you go, you become less connected and less, I guess, sensitive to getting input from those folks below. And so, like that's sort of the irony. And then most of my research from there is just kind of looked at some of the problems and I'll say funny business that happens when people try and be a little bit more honest with their boss, and some of the power dynamics associated with that. And then, as I said, where the messes really start to add up.
So, as you've been teaching companies and executives about this, any examples come to mind where somebody was either able to implement this well and figure out how to get employees to voice, or maybe a counterexample of how it goes poorly?
Yeah, maybe I'll start off with kind of the three main principles, and then yes, I
All
have
the better.
some great stories about the things that work and don't across each of those. So I kind of break things down into, let's say, like three different categories or three different challenges that really surface with this. So the first is, how do leaders kind of create that culture of voice, or to get people to feel comfortable in speaking up in the first place? Um, One example where a leader was, and again, this is not the most uplifting story in the world, but a leader was very much a sports fan and used a lot of sports analogies all over the place, was interested in, high performance teams and all this kind of stuff. And so he actually brought like a baseball bat to work to like fully illustrate how driven he was around quarterly numbers and stuff like that. And even got to the point where he would like bang it on the table to reinforce whatever points he was going to make. When you start to send some of those signals, like you're going to bring a bat to work, like that doesn't exactly showcase how open you are to like other people's input about what it is you're doing, because all you're doing is jamming home like the thing or the vision or
Yeah.
the way that you want to lead the organization. So like that first challenge is all about, well, what are literally the behaviors leaders can engage in to create a sense of comfort, or at least that it's not risky to speak the truth to someone that has a lot of power, certainly has an impact on your career, and even doles out things like rewards or promotions or special opportunities that are desired and kind of rare in organizations. So like that's kind of the first challenge. Um, the second one is to almost get into the head or the psychology of managers. Like, what would make it easy for them to say yes? So said a little bit differently, as an employee, how can you pitch your ideas in order to set up your chance for success? And so there, a lot of the themes of that research are pretty tactical. Like, do you want to talk about like all the upside? If only we took action on these ideas, here's all the great stuff that would ensue. Or do you want to pitch it as sort of a threat? If we don't do this, here's all the bad stuff that's going to happen. And like each of us kind of have an intuition about which framing or, you know, what tactic is going to work better or worse. Do you want to invite some of your friends to help you and speak up? Or do you just want to do that on your own? Do you want to do it more formally with a buttoned up PowerPoint presentation? Or is it more informal around the proverbial water cooler? Like we all have these intuitions about what's going to work or what's not, but you can also start to look at like what's actually effective, what actually changes the manager's psychology for them to be more receptive and feel like it's a less threatening experience when someone comes to them and says, you know what, the way you've been leading, the decisions you're making, they're wrong, and it could be better if you do X, Y, or Z. Um, and then the final challenge is how to turn all these ideas from employees into substantive action. So as a leader, you're going to be faced with, 1,000 ideas that come across your way. You can't implement them all. So number one, how do you take some smidge of those ideas and turn it into action? But, a natural consequence of that is, well, how do you turn people down and not tick them off so that they're still engaged enough to come back again sometime down the road? And like those are really tricky and nuanced processes and conversations. How do you glean all these data, assemble some insights, convey it to a top management team, assemble resources, and ultimately devote them in order to make change? While at the same time telling, the rest of the 90%, you have a fantastic idea, it's just not going to fly this time.
Yeah.
Like those are all, some pretty significant challenges.
So I don't know if we have time to dig into all of these, but I'm curious. Like the first one, create a culture of voice.
Yep.
So how not to do that is to bring a baseball bat and hit the table. What do managers do to create the sense of comfort so that people will share?
Um, I, if I were going to, again, take a step back and paint something at the broadest brush stroke, I would say you need to be very proactive in reaching out and soliciting.
Okay.
So, there's kind of the proverbial have an open door policy, like say that you're open, you're willing to get feedback. But kind of the pithy, response I always get is like, no manager has said, I have a closed door policy. Like
Yeah.
no one usually says I'm unopen to like hearing people's ideas. So most managers kind of go about their day thinking that they're nice, they would welcome feedback, but very rarely do they proactively like knock on doors, make space in regular team meetings, create a set of systems within their team that get people talking so that when the real conversation starts, they're already comfortable and will lean in again.
Mm.
Um, a friend of mine likes to talk about, so here's a very concrete example. If a friend of mine likes to talk about like doing 2-word check-ins at the beginning of every meeting. How are you feeling? What's going on? Summarize in 2 words, and we go around and like all 8 of us will say that thing before we get started with the meeting. And like what that does kind of psychologically is number one, it forces people to actually say something.
Yeah.
It's say like how you're coming into this meeting. You're stressed, you're overwhelmed, you're really ticked off because of the last meeting you're in, you're excited, like whatever it is, you can summarize that super quickly. But it also creates sort of an expectation that everyone around the table has something to say. And so when you actually get into the meeting a little later on, everyone has already spoken, everyone has already divulged something. So when you're getting to kind of the heart of the matter, they're more primed to then dive in and say something meaningful and honest for, whatever the issue of the day is. So like that's kind of a example or practice that kind of helps with this. Some other stuff that we're just finding right now So the stuff is not published, but kind of hot off the press. One is eye contact. It signals respect. When someone is talking as a leader, if you give deference to them rather than checking your phone or doing whatever else, it signals that level of trust, and that has an effect on kind of how safe people feel in speaking up later. And second is a notion of consistency. So like if you're super nice most of the time, but then you're a grade A jerk, and then you come back down, like your employees have no idea what they're going to get the next time they come to you. And so maintaining a level of consistency above and beyond just being generally nice, like that's also really important. So logistically, what that means, like don't cancel one-on-ones. One-on-ones are great. And those should be a consistent and stable um, uh, uh, foundation that employees can come to count on.
It just got me thinking about my classes that I teach. I love it when I walk into my classroom and everybody is talking. And it takes work to get to that point because typically on the first day and for the first few weeks, it's like people are just on their phones, they're on their
Yep,
computers. And I think about like, how can I get them talking? And it's not, to your point, it's like taking the principled approach or the overall mindset of like being very proactive. So I think about like every day, encouraging people to talk in different ways. Every day we're doing some sort of group activity with different people. Every day we're getting people to share and open up. And
yep,
throughout the course of the semester, I love it and watch it, towards the end of the semester, I'm typically walking in and everybody's talking because
yep.
somebody knows somebody feels comfortable. So I think that's great. Lots of techniques you touched on, but the general approach of just being very proactive, and that's the mindset. And then from there, figuring out what techniques
Yeah.
work.
And the only one other nuance I'll point out with it is that level of proactivity does come at a perceived cost. So when you take time, so if you're teaching a class of 40 students and you take time right at the beginning of the class to say, hey, every single one of you, how are you doing today? What's going on? Like that takes time away from, I don't know how long your classes are. Ours are 75 minutes. If I do
Yeah.
that for all 40 people and they take a minute each, half my class is gone,
Yeah.
right? But the point is that um, emphasizing and valuing and prioritizing that type of activity both sends signals about how much you care about that kind of stuff. And it sets a foundation such that not in this first meeting, but in the 12th meeting of the semester, you're going to have much better conversations overall.
Yeah.
And so, but that's what I've found with, especially with executives that are like type A plus plus, like I don't have time for this touchy-feely stuff. Like, let's get down to the task at hand. We got to make some decisions. We got to move on. Let's not waste time and we can get right back to it. The downside of doing that is in that 12th meeting, you're not going to have like the real honest take about what is happening right now that could qualitatively change the direction of the company. So I don't want to say like this level of proactivity is costless. It's not just like, hey, go out of your office sometime and knock on some doors and everything will be fine. It's it's costly. Like there's a premium that you pay to give up some of the task related conversation to prioritize some of these other aspects.
Yeah, that's great because I love two things I think of. There's no solutions, only trade-offs. Like there's an opportunity cost, right? We have to always
Yep.
acknowledge the opportunity cost. And I was teaching a class where we did spend a significant amount of time on the get to know you, how's everybody doing, check in. And one day I had a sub, and um, but I was in the class still, and
Yep.
the sub and the students were like, okay, let's do all this stuff, and the sub was like, no, we don't have time. We have too much important material to cover. We don't have time for this, and they launched right in. And because of the culture that had been created, the students like revolted, and they were like, you know, now of course there's times to do it and there's times
Of
not to, but I
course.
think that's great to acknowledge that yes, this comes at a cost, and we've got to be thoughtful about it. Well, this is also interesting, Ethan. We could keep going, but we should probably wrap up here. Any final things you'd like to share as we close?
I'll just end everything kind of right back where I started. There's a fundamental assumption that being slightly more honest at work will pay some dividends. And, this isn't just like a general ethos or a general, wouldn't it be nice if like we could treat each other well? What our research has found time and time again is when you can foster these honest conversations and legitimate action results from them, organizations can thrive. And it's both financially, it's operationally, and it's also culturally. And so that's where I kind of go back to, if you can be a little bit honest, you're going to more fully invest yourself in the company, and leaders are going to make better decisions.
You'll have better data to make better decisions. Everyone's going to feel
Yep.
more heard. So many wonderful benefits that do come at a cost, but generally worth it. Well, Ethan, this is so great. Thanks so much. Love hearing these stories and lessons and ideas. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Nate.